Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm re-referring file item 72, SB 68, to the Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee. Members, we will recess the regular session for the purpose of convening the third extraordinary session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer and pledge and other opening procedures in the regular session for those items in the third extraordinary session. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 33.
Mr. Chirico, for what purpose?
All bills deemed read and amendments adopted.
All bills deemed read and amendments adopted. Mr. Chirico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby request unanimous consent to allow the authors or floor managers to take up the following bills today without reference to file for the purpose of third reading. In the third extraordinary session, AB 3X 33 by Mr. Valines and SB 3X 13.
Without objection. You ready? Move to file item 1, AB third extraordinary 33. Mr. Valines, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 33 by Assemblymember Valines, an act relating to energy.
Mr. Valines?
Yes.
You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today with the Governor's reorganization for energy. This bill is an important bill. It has been a work in progress, but what this bill basically does is says we're going to move clean, reliable, renewable energy into a new agency so we can streamline that process. We have gone through and taken amendments in 3 separate committees, working with the Chair of Natural Resources, the Chair of Appropriations, and the Chair of UNC. All committees, we've only had 2 no votes in all of those, and have taken amendments from each chair. And I have to say, in working a bill bipartisan through has been a great experience. I would ask your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no debate or discussion, clerk. Mrs. Strike the roll. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise in support of AB 33, the Energy Reorganization Bill. This is a key part to our ability to create a one-stop licensing process for large renewable power plants. This past year, we've made tremendous strides in increasing our state's renewable portfolio standard. This bill is going to give us the necessary infrastructure to meet our RPS goals so that California can continue to be a leader in clean energy. I ask for your aye vote.
Very well, Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Valines, I ask you to be nice today.
I rise also in support of AB 33 XXX. I'm proud to be a co-author of this bill, and much has been already said about what it does, but you know, there are lots of things that we can do in this state to streamline the way that we do things. This bill is a perfect example of this. It's a long bill. There's lots of stuff in here because there's a lot of things that had to be consolidated, but it's really pretty simple. We're consolidating a whole bunch of related functions that are spread around different agencies into one agency in order to better achieve the goals that we have for the state. Again, I recommend an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Nilo. Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This bill did come before the Natural Resources Committee, and the governor's original proposal had basically was included removing, retaining a board like the Energy Commission, but removing much of its function. Currently, the Energy Commission approves things like the IPER, which is the Integrated Energy. I'm going to forget all the words for that acronym, but it's basically the statewide energy planning document. It includes, the Energy Commission had also the authority to approve regs like our building codes, our appliance standards, awards under the PEER grants, which is the Public Interest Energy Research Grants, various other financial awards. So one of the things that the Natural Resources Committee did in its amending the bill was to add those functions back to the Commission so that we could have the confidence that there was a public process and a transparent process. So we did a number of things which I think greatly improved the bill, and I personally feel that energy is important enough in this state that to put a cabinet level person could be a beneficial thing, and given that there's still retained much of the autonomy and authority of the Energy Commission, it's a very good work product.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I have to reluctantly rise in opposition to this measure. There are some 350 pages in this document, this bill, and I doubt anyone in this room, and including the author, is at least as late as the appropriations hearing that we had a day or so about, have even read it. And we are making a major change to something that doesn't need fixing. This is a solution looking for a problem. The Energy Commission has been working just fine, has very few appeals. It's highly regarded. And there's no reason that seems to be articulated as to why we need to change this. Well, the governor says he needs to be able to make policy. Well, he can do that now. When the Energy Commission makes their statement on energy policy, he has an opportunity to respond within 90 days to the legislature. He can do that. But the problem with there's no transparency in this bill because the Public Meetings Law, or Act, Bagley-Keene, does not apply to the Department of Energy created here or to the Secretary of Energy that is created under this bill. It will apply to the Secretary insofar as the Secretary is a member of the board. And by the way, if you look at, you can do this just by looking through. You'll see Commission Board, Commission Board, Commission Board, Commission Board. If you look through the language of the bill. So what is it? Is it the Commission or is it the board? But public meetings only applies to the Secretary insofar as there is any decision only insofar as the activities of the board are concerned. Now, and what about ex parte communication? Ex parte communication applies to the Secretary insofar as the Secretary is considering a matter before the board or the commission or whatever it is. But what about as to discussions that occurred before the application was filed? And the bill, the ex parte communications, doesn't apply to that. It erodes local control. The bill expands the state's exclusive jurisdiction over thermal power plants exceeding 50 megawatts to include solar plants, which are now subject to local permitting. There's a certain benefit to have rivaling agencies, having a commission with a department with some other board somewhere else, because sometimes they disagree. And it's usually the consumer who benefits from that. Another problem is that there's certain information that is available, confidential information available from the FERC in order for the Energy Commission now, or the Public Utility Commission, to try and enforce improper actions in the market. But the FERC will not release that information if a state agency has a relationship with the sellers and buyers of the particular commodity. And right now, you have a secretary sits as a board member, and then you have a secretary that runs a department. So who's going to be able to get the confidential data that's necessary in order to ensure fairness in the marketplace? There's going to be tremendous disruption. There's no plan, or either implementation plan or financing plan that guides what's going to happen once this bill becomes law. Finally, I even found a reference to a code section in the Public Resources Code that doesn't even exist.
I'm sorry, 30 seconds, Mr. Calderon.
It doesn't even exist. It's government section 91951. So what I'm saying, members, is that, you know, in the 11th hour, we're passing this stuff out that has significant implications. It's going to transfer authority of the legislature to the governor's office.
Mr. Fuentes? Mr. Fuentes?
Wait.
Mr. Rico, for what purpose?
Motion resolutions. Hereby request unanimous consent to grant Mr. Calderon an extra 5 minutes.
Without objection.
I won't need the full 5 minutes. We're doing something here that is changing the way we make policy in the state, and we're moving the legislature out of that process. Because you have the governor, which is going to appoint the members to a board or commission or whatever it is. You're going to have a new Secretary of Energy, works for the governor, being the chair, and you're going to have all of the staff that currently works for the commission now under the jurisdiction of this new Department of Energy. And they're changing the authority to cite transmission lines and taking that away from the Public Utilities Commission and placing it within this Department of Energy. So I'm not saying that there isn't merit in consolidation, and I'm not saying that there can't be something that could be a good work product. I'm just saying that we are incapable of doing a good work product in the time that we have now, and we're voting blindly, not knowing what we're voting for. We need to stop doing that. We are hurting this state, and we're hurting our constitutional form of government in terms of the proper role of the legislature and executive branch, and I ask for no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. It is, as my colleague from Berkeley mentioned, a good work product. There's still yet a lot more to do on this work product, and the hope here, members, is that we can have a full vetting of what's before us in the Senate. I well respect the concerns that my colleague who previously spoke a second ago has with the product, but this bill, as a point of information to my colleagues, went through Utilities and Commerce Committee, and most of the amendments, I want to thank the author, were vetted and worked with through not just my staff, but that of the Speaker's staff. So let me just briefly say that I think that this is a good product and that it deserves your favorable consideration, and I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Villines, would you like to close, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out a couple of things. First, I have the utmost respect for my colleague from Southern California who rose in opposition to the bill. I do agree with him not to give up our authority. I do want to point out in this bill that it is Senate confirmation. The legislature controls that still. We retain our authority to do that. I also want to point out all of the transparency issues have been accepted based on the Chair of Natural Resources amendments, which were good ones. All the transparency transfers from PUC to the new agency as well. And I would just point out also that the local control issue will be settled as well. I would just point out, and just like to close on this, and again, this bill will probably end up coming back to us, and so we will have to fix some things. But this has been an issue. Permission to read, sir?
Without objection.
Thank you. We did have 2 informational hearings. We did go through 3 committees in this House. We are on this floor. The bill's been in print since May, and an original one since February. But I want to read, thank you for permission, sir, a couple of quick items.
Without objection.
Problems with the current structure are well known. 1984, the Little Hoover Commission found that Energy Commission lacked effective mechanisms to put policy recommendations into effect and that there's overlap and duplication between the Energy Commission and the CPUC. In 1990, the legislature's Joint Committee on Energy Regulation and the Environment observed that energy policies and agencies were significantly fragmented. It also observed that there is no state energy policy and that combination of the two result in a lack of accountability and effectiveness. In 1995, the Little Hoover Commission declared Governor Wilson's reorganization proposal to be an important opportunity to align similar functions so that increased efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability are achieved. In 2003, the Public Policy Institute of California stated, quote, that the fractured and overlapping set of agencies leads to inefficiencies and conflicts, and concluded the state energy policy has lost its coherence because many facets of devising the energy policy are addressed in so many separate forums. And to close, even the LAO, as recently as the last few years, has basically said the same thing. This is an attempt to bring clean, renewable energy to California. And I would end with this as well. This will help the RPS implementation. In fact, many have said without this bill, and I believe this is why the Speaker and the chairs have all spoken for this bill, we need this bill to implement the RPS. We may have some differences there, but I believe in clean energy. I believe in a cleaner environment, and this gives us a chance to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to read, sir. I ask your aye vote.
Very well. All debate having ceased, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 42, ayes 43, noes 4. Measure is adopted. Move to file item SB 3rd Extraordinary 13. Duchesne. Mr. Yee and Mr. Smythe will be presenting. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 13 by Senator Yee, an act relating to domestic violence, making appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Smythe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm here to carry SB 13 XXX on behalf of my colleague from San Francisco, Senator Yee. We have been working very closely over the past several weeks to find a way to restore the funding to the domestic violence shelters throughout the state of California. As you know, as part of the budget, the governor line item vetoed every dollar that the state has been spending and giving to domestic violence shelters throughout the state. It completely wiped out the funding. As a result, since that time, in just those few short months, at least 6 domestic violence shelters throughout the state have already closed. And these are shelters from every part of the state, whether it's the Bay Area, Central Valley, Southern California. Not only have we lost those 6, several others are, in all of our communities, are on the brink of shutting down. And if they haven't shut down, they have certainly had to reduce services. And now we all know, every single one of us in our districts from the Oregon border to Mexico have had an experience with constituents with domestic violence. This is not something that goes by party lines or socioeconomic lines or racial lines. This is something that affects all Californians in every one of our districts. And so what Senator Yee and I have been working on is finding a way to restore that funding. We've gone through a few different ways, and we've met some opposition, but now we have worked with those groups to eliminate the opposition. And what we're looking at is adding $16.3 million, taking it from the Alternative and Renewal Fuel and Vehicle Technology Fund. It is a loan. It is not a taking. It is a loan from that fund, and it will be an injection of cash that is desperately needed through our domestic violence shelters throughout the state. We've removed all opposition. I understand that there is, concerns about anything that we're doing when it comes to, to fiscal impacts, but I think we can all agree that the impacts of closing domestic violence shelters throughout the state of California is something that we most certainly cannot handle. I don't believe any of us came here, to make these decisions. We knew we had to make tough decisions with the budget, but to close domestic violence shelters and to eliminate all funding for them is beyond what any of us came here to do. And so I stand with my colleagues throughout the state and in the Senate and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise in strong support of this measure. The good work that that the senator has done and Mr. Smythe is to be commended. This is something that I took very personally when it happened. The vetoing of the $20 million that was there to support domestic violence shelters throughout the state of California was a devastating loss in my community, where we only have 2 shelters that provide those services, and they are desperately in need of those funds in order to be able to survive. Members, there is no legitimate choice in this matter as far as I'm concerned. You cannot just tell somebody who's been a battered or abused spouse or partner that they have no recourse but to go to the ER, that there's no other services available to help them. This is the right thing to do. I'm incredibly proud to be a co-sponsor of it, and I strongly urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in strong support of this bill. I want to commend Mr. Smythe and also Senator Yee for working very hard on restoring funding to domestic violence shelters. I was happy to work with Senator Yee's office and the Speaker's staff to facilitate this bill, and especially to find a good funding source for the bill. And I want to commend the Speaker's budget staff, especially for working with Mr. Yee and Mr. Smythe on this. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Fioritani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Last week, we passed a bill off of this floor to the governor's desk relative to domestic violence shelters, extending the deadline and the sunset. This provides the kind of resources they're going to need to deal with the services that are so critical and important in regards to this issue. I wanted to thank Assemblyman Smythe and Senator Yee for their great work, and also note that the collaboration between both sides of the aisle on this issue and the previous issue around energy is a good example for us to set relative to getting good policy done on this floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I also want to applaud the author and Mr. Smythe for working on this issue. This blue pencil was such a blow to our communities. It's one of the few blue pencil items that literally people will die. If we cannot have shelters for these women who are being abused to escape the violent situations that they're in, people will die. And I love seeing the bipartisan support, and I hope everyone goes up and votes aye on this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I too rise in strong support of this bill. I want to thank my colleague from Santa Clarita and the Senator for bringing this bill forward. This is the type of legislation that all of us should come together on. There are people suffering in my district. In Bakersfield, we had a shelter that closed. These are very, very important for battered women, those of domestic violence. And it's a pleasure to raise my microphone and speak in support of this, and I want to commend the author. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Mr. Smythe, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, certainly my close couldn't compare to the comments that we've had from members throughout the state from both sides of the aisle. And I know that it's been a tough year, and we've had to make some tough decisions, but our vote here today is one that we can be proud of and that we can point to our constituents when they ask, what did we do in these last couple days? Here's one where we can say we worked together to restore funding to domestic violence shelters throughout the state, and that's what they sent us to do. And thank you for all your work. Thank the Speaker's staff as well for helping to find the funding source, and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. All debate having ceased, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 61, noes 1. Resolution amendments are adopted. Are these amendments? On the urgency, ayes 61, noes 1. Measure passes. Very well. Members, we're going to recess the third extraordinary session, and we're back in regular session. Members, we have Assemblymember Doug LaMalfa here. Please recognize him. Welcome back to the chambers. We also have some guests of Ms. Huber. Ms. Huber, would you like to recognize your guest?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like you to help join me in recognizing two of my constituents that are here today, Christine Simpson and Matthew Lewis, who also happen to be my brother and sister.
Wow, great. Welcome to the chambers. We are prepared to take up file item 201, AB 172 by Mr. Smythe. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 172 by Assemblymember Smythe, an act relating to alcoholic beverages.
Mr. Smythe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a good bill. We've all voted for it before. Ask for an aye vote.
Very well. Seeing and hearing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 54, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Move to file item 202, AB 1568 by Ms. Salas. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1568 by Assemblymember Salas, an act relating to taxation.
Ms. Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm proud to present to you AB 1568, which helps homeowners affected by the wildfires that occurred in 2008 and 2009 in Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties. The bill provides homeowners tax relief for the losses suffered as a result of the wildfires. The bill also includes a cleanup provision to the Healthy Families Restoration Bill that is awaiting the governor's signature. The Senate approved AB 1568 with no votes, and I request your aye vote to help out the victims of these disastrous wildfires.
Seeing and hearing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those voters who desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 53, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Move to file item 203, AB 295. Mr. Amiano, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 295 by Assemblymember Amiano, an act relating to public social services.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a simple, cost-effective measure that reaffirms the state's commitment to fostering permanency and maintaining lifelong connections for at-risk and troubled youth. The bill was amended in the Senate to remove cleanup provisions to wraparound services. The bill now simply extends the time frame for expenditures and reporting on older foster youth adoption pilot program that focuses on pre-adoption and post-adoption services. AB 295 has received unanimous bipartisan support throughout both houses and is supported by the City and County of San Francisco and the County Welfare Directors Association. I thank you for your consideration and ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those voters who desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 64, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 204, AB 359 by Mr. Nava. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 359 by Assemblymember Nava, an act relating to cancer.
Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Currently, the California Department of Public Health reimburses providers for breast cancer screening under the Every Woman Counts program done by analog mammography only. This bill will expand that to digital without any additional cost. The Senate amendments help clarify the measure further. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 63, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Move to file item 205, AB 386. Mr. Ruskin, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 386 by Assemblymember Ruskin and others, an act relating to post-secondary education.
Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a gap in the provision of course materials in our public colleges and universities, and that is that hearing impaired students do not have access to audiovisual materials on an equal playing field with those students who are not hearing impaired. This bill addresses that. The amendments in the Senate provide the process that will be followed to ensure the students get these materials. This process was a collaborative effort between the colleges and universities and the textbook publishers. I ask for an aye vote.
Very well. Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those voters who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 69, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 206, AB 429 by Ms. Brownlee. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 429 by Assemblymember Brownlee and others, an act relating to public school accountability.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're quite
I'm
welcome.
all ready. I'm ready.
Be therefore ready.
Yes, I am. AB 429 seeks to improve the state's public school assessment and accountability system so that it measures and reports more valid, accurate, and useful pupil achievement data. The bill has no opposition and has received bipartisan support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 69, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 207, AB 566. Mr. Nava, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 566 by Assemblymember Nava and others, an act relating to mobile home parks.
Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 566 is intended to close a loophole that's been exploited in recent years by some mobile home park owners who wish to subdivide and sell a park against the wishes of the local government and those who own their homes in the park. This bill closes that loophole, and the bill gives local governments control over local land use decisions. Amendments in the Senate change the bill and now clarify existing law to say that cities and counties may consider, let me emphasize that, the only change, cities and counties may consider whether a survey already required by law represents the support of a majority of park residents when they're deciding to approve, deny, or conditionally approve a subdivision. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Nava moves to call. Move to file item 208, AB 623 by Dr. Emerson. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 623 by Assemblymember Emerson and others, an act relating to architects.
Dr. Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Senate amendments to Assembly Bill 623 change the reporting requirements on the existing Disability Access Continuing Education law to allow the California Architecture Board to do the reporting in a more efficient manner. This bill has received no negative votes, and I ask for your aye vote in Senate amendments.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Move to item 209, AB 758 by Ms. Skinner. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 758 by Assemblymember Skinner and others, an act relating to energy.
Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 78 would enable the Energy Commission to develop and implement a comprehensive program that would help us bring the building stock in our state that was built prior to California's groundbreaking energy efficiency building codes, Title 24, all of our existing building stock that was built prior to Title 24 would be able to be brought up to the kind of energy efficiency that our new building stock now has. If we improve the efficiency of that existing building stock by just 2%, we not only eliminate the need to construct a number of new power plants, we also create statewide over 180,000 jobs. Based on the Energy Commission's analysis, if cost-effective energy efficiency measures were applied to that building stock, there would be a savings by the commercial tenants, the residential, the property owners of their utility bills by approximately $4.5 billion. The CEC's plan is to put over $100 million of the ERA stimulus funds into the energy efficiency retrofits, both commercial and residential building stock, and to training programs to bring the workforce up to speed to be able to implement this work. Amendments taken in the Senate removed the opposition from the PUC and specified that no state funds would be used in the implementation of this bill's provisions. The bill has bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask your aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally votes. Ayes 41. Ayes 42. Noes 22. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 210, AB 773. Mr. Liu. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 773 by Assemblymember Liu, an act relating to health facilities.
Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill seeks to address the issues surrounding substandard care in California's nursing homes. AB 773 provides clarity to all residents and their loved ones by requiring a long-term care facility to prominently post a copy of a citation after a facility receives a Class A or AA violation. These violations place patients in immediate jeopardy and represent the most severe cases of nursing home abuse and neglect. The Senate amendments removed all the oppositions. We work with all the stakeholders. We expect to request an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 47, noes 9. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 211, AB 926. Mr. Ruskin.
No, don't call it. Go to 2.
Assembly Bill 926 by Assemblymember Ruskin and others, an act relating to public contracts.
Mr. Ruskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The loss leader law protects small businesses by stipulating that a business can't sell products below cost in order to drive competition out of business. It's important for small business. This bill adds one sentence to state contracts telling contractors they must obey the loss leader law. The amendments taken in the Senate allow for inadvertent errors and for forwarding the information about them to the legislature. This bill is sponsored by the California Small Business Association and the California Black Chamber of Commerce. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 63, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Is this it? Clerk will post. Clerk will post. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Lifting the call. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 9. The measure is adopted. File item 212, AB 938, by the Committee on Judiciary. Mr. Fuhrer, cloak or read.
Assembly Bill 938 by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to children.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill back on concurrence. It enjoys complete support. It has no opposition, no votes. And here's what the bill does. The bill implements a federal mandate to assure that when kids are removed from their parents and placed in foster care, their relatives are apprised of this, which gives the increased likelihood that they'll be placed in a loving environment. Amendments in the Senate at the request of the administration and as required by federal law apply the mandate to kids who are in delinquency and then removed to foster care. Urge an aye vote.
Seeing no debate or discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. All those voters desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 56, no 0. So the amendments are concurred in. File item 213, AB 962 by Mr. DeLeon. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 962 by Assemblymember DeLeon, an act relating to ammunition.
Mr. DeLeon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a bipartisan measure, AB 962. Seeks to keep ammunition out of the hands of criminals and gang members, as well as provide a valuable tool for law enforcement in their efforts to track down armed and dangerous criminals in our streets. This is a measure that's strongly supported by law enforcement, that being Sheriff Lee Baca, my police chief of LAPD, Mr. William Brandt, as well as the police chief of the city of Sacramento. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no debate. Oh, Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must rise to oppose this measure. This will impose even more restrictions on law-abiding citizens to receive their ammunition. The federal government enacted this measure, similar measure, in 1968. They rescinded it back in '86 because they did not solve or use and stop one crime that this had. So in 18 years the program is placed, not one crime is solved with it. In my opinion, the ammunition registration serves only to infringe the rights of law-abiding citizens rather than stopping criminals. And I would ask for your no vote.
Mr. Gaines.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to this bill. I don't know why we are limiting the ability to purchase ammunition from 99.9% of the folks that are law-abiding citizens, and they ought to have a right to get that ammunition. We ought to be focusing on the criminals. Let's get them behind bars. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this measure has an interesting provision in it. A lot of folks don't like 3 strikes for violent, serious felons. This bill gives 3 strikes for legitimate dealers in ammunition. If 3 times they have failed to count the number of bullets that they sold to somebody, they lose their license forever. This will not in any way protect us on the streets, ladies and gentlemen. Year after year, we have bill after bill that's going to save us from those in society who will get the guns and do the crime. It's not the law-abiding citizens and gun owners of California that are causing the problems. I can assure you, all my years heading the Board of Prison Terms, it is not indeed. It's a bad bill for the people of California, and it deserves a no vote. And if some of this correction stuff slips over and gets out of this House and is signed into law, our citizens are going to be needing their guns and bullets even more.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. California law, and indeed federal law, contains provisions that prohibit certain people from being able to purchase handguns. Felons, for example. This law would say that if you can't buy a handgun, well, then you shouldn't be able to buy ammunition for a handgun. The arguments in opposition to this bill seem to suggest that we shouldn't prohibit anybody from having a handgun. But there's bipartisan support long embedded in our history for prohibitions against certain people being able to own firearms, and that's because there's a common view that they're dangerous. Why would we allow people to get bullets if they're not allowed to own the guns into which those bullets would be placed? I urge an aye vote.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. You know, bills like this we've seen time and time again on this floor year after year. And as a law-abiding citizen of the United States of America who owns several firearms and is trained with the United States military on using several more various types of firearms, none of which have been used in the commission of a crime, none of which have been held illegally, none of which have ever caused any harm to an individual outside of the law. What I find remarkable about legislation like this that's offered time and time and time again is that it infringes on my right as a law-abiding American citizen. Why is it that this body has in recent months countenanced bills that would make it easier to release criminals out on the streets, and yet today we'll no doubt see at least half of the members of this body rising to infringe on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Californians? It stuns me, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely stuns me that every year we go after the legitimate rights of American citizens while ignoring prudent measures to actually get tough on criminals. Ladies and gentlemen, the data from the equivalent federal law that was enacted many years ago shows that measures like this had no impact on crime. And why should they? Criminals don't follow the law. All you're doing is trying to take the teeth out of the Second Amendment by making it incrementally more difficult for law-abiding American citizens to be able to enjoy their Second Amendment rights. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sick and tired of provisions like this. I am offended as a law-abiding, weapons-owning American. I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. DeVore. Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise to oppose this bill. Let me ask you. We take ammunition off the streets, and crime should go down. If we take guns off the street, crime should go down. Is that correct? Well, I've got the statistics here from the FBI, and I've done a little research on my own. Ammunition sales have gone through the roof in the last 6 months. Handgun sales have gone through the roof in the last 6 months. Now, there are a lot of reasons of why this has happened, but let's just look at the statistics of what's happened in the last 6 months. When handguns have gone up and ammunition has gone up, but the FBI statistics say that about 90% of the 100,000 or more cities in this state, violent crime has gone down, including the city of Los Angeles. Violent crime has gone down over the last year. So I don't know how you get that correlation, that by taking guns away from people who use them as sport, people who use them responsibly, collectors, hunters, people who want to use guns in a responsible manner and want to be able to buy the ammunition to do those responsible behaviors, is something that's going to curtail crime. Because there is no nexus. That doesn't happen. What does happen is that good people that want to use guns responsibly the door has been shut in their face time and time again by this legislature. This is another effort to do that. Now, I applaud the many efforts that come out of this legislature to allow people to live their lives. But these types of bills that come forward take rights away from people, hurt them. This is not the way we should be going about this. This is a very bad bill. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Garrick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. I'd like to first make an observation as it relates to the, let's say, the original presentation. Maybe a correction would be more in line, that to date, tracking what I see here to be the Assembly Republican public safety votes, the appropriation votes, the floor votes on this prior, the Senate floor votes. There hasn't been one Republican, so I wouldn't classify this as a bipartisan bill. I think it needs to be identified correctly. This bill is wrong-headed, and with permission to read, I'd like to go through some of the steps that are going to be required just so everyone knows what they're voting on.
Without objection.
Thank you. When you go to purchase ammunition, and this could be anything from 22 to a 45, the date of the sale of the transaction has to be recorded. The purchaser or transferee's driver's license or other identification number and the state to which it is issued must be recorded. It doesn't mention anything about consular cards, and whether you have to use those to record. The brand, type, amount of ammunition sold or otherwise transferred, the purchaser or transferor's signature, the name of the salesperson who proceeds the sale, and finally, the sixth item for the simple purchase of a box of shells or ammunition is the right thumbprint of the purchaser or transferor of the ammunition. This is an intrusion. This is extra paperwork. This will cause administrative fees to go up. This also involves fines of up to $1,000 if there's some paperwork error by a clerk when filling this form out. And on the third one, as identified earlier by my colleague from Northern California, the dealer could lose the option of ever selling any ammunition. We have from Big Fives to Walmarts across the state selling ammunition. This puts an undue burden on them and the purchasers, not to mention crossing the Second Amendment, the First Amendment right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Mr. Speaker and members, I want a point of clarification on this measure. Obviously, I think the first concern all of us should have would be any attempt to violate the Second Amendment right, a constitutional right guaranteed for all Americans, the right to bear arms. However, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, this bill doesn't say that. But what the bill attempts to do is to make sure that those individuals who are not good citizens entitled to all of the benefits of the Constitution, and that happens quite often when you go to jail and those kinds of things, for those individuals who specifically are not in a status to be able to even possess a gun, a prisoner, for example, then in fact they are saying in this proposal that they should not have any bullets. Why do they need any bullets? And then finally, the whole issue of the requirement of the thumbprint becomes a tool for law enforcement to be able to bounce that evidence off of discovering the truth should something occur that is a crime in our communities. This proposal in no way attempts to violate the Second Amendment right for law-abiding citizens. It attempts to provide a tool for the law enforcement agencies that each of us depend on, the first responders of trouble and problems in our community. And so I think a point of clarification on this measure is important, and that we do really need to be clear that it is not any stretch of the imagination an attempt to undermine the Second Amendment right. It is a measure that finally attempts to try to tighten up in many ways those individuals who, unfortunately, because of their status in our society, are not entitled to the same constitutional rights that others are entitled to. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Barry Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, question for the author.
Without objection, sir.
Assemblymember DeLeon, does this include pellets and BBs? They go into little handguns?
No.
It wouldn't. Okay. No. Good enough. Members, as Assemblyman DeVore mentioned, as we look at releasing criminals and then we cut back on our ability to defend ourselves, I got real problems with that. Secondly, oftentimes it's very difficult to find ammunition that you want, and we buy it online like we buy so many things online. This bill will prohibit from buying online from the Cabela's because it has to be face-to-face.
So we've eliminated that. So we've taken another chink out of the sportsman's efforts to be able to enjoy himself in the field. And so this is, once again, just another notch in our ability to do our hunting and do our law-abiding use with our guns. And it's getting very frustrating to watch these things incrementally take that away and incrementally take the desire of the youth away because it gets too tough to get the ammunition. This is a bad bill. I urge a no vote.
Thank you. Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill for many reasons. Some of you were able to hear the testimony of 2 police officers who were left for dead by a criminal, a man with a criminal record who had just bought ammunition from a gun store. And I don't believe that we are able to continue the way we have been with guns flying off the shelves, as all of us have been reading, and no check on ammunition. We regulate many businesses in this state, appropriately regulate. Many of you have voted on it. We regulate beauty parlors. We regulate drugstores. We regulate pharmacies, and we regulate our ability to buy prescription drugs.
Very well.
This is a time we need to regulate ammunition so it doesn't get in the hands of the wrong people. And I certainly support the right of my friends and colleagues who are the right people and the rightful owners of guns to hunt, and they will not be jeopardized in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission to question the author?
Without objection.
Mr. De Leon, can you give me a list of the law enforcement agencies that have endorsed your bill here, please? Can you read it to me, please?
It's on page 213. The Chief of Police of Corte Madera. Permission to read, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
The Chief of Police, the cities of Corte Madera, Larkspur, Chief of Police of the City of Gardena, Chief of Police of the City of Hillsburg, Chief of Police of the City of Long Beach, Chief of Police of the City of Los Angeles, that's LAPD Chief William Bratton, Chief of Police of the City of Oxnard, Chief of Police of the City of Oakland, Chief of Police City of Pleasant Hill, Santa Barbara, Stockton, Sacramento, LA County Sheriffs. The list goes on and on. I can keep going if you want me to, Mr.
That's
Love.
fine. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Speaker, permission to read?
Without objection, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. There's also a list here of organizations, police organizations, that outnumber that about 100 to 1, and this list is not supporting is the California Chiefs of Police, California State Sheriff's Association not supporting, Law Enforcement Officers Association not supporting, the Police Officers Research Association of California, PORAC, not supporting, the Attorney General not supporting, the Sheriff of Butte County, the Sheriff of Shasta, Glenn, Lassen, Sutter, San Benito, Riverside, Fresno, San Bernardino, Tehama, Trinity, Stanislaus, San Joaquin del Norte, and Kern County. This is a bill that has tremendous opposition from law enforcement communities throughout the state of California. I urge a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bradford.
Mr. Speaker, as a law-abiding citizen, a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment rights, a Little League coach who is required to have a fingerprint, thumbprint to coach a Little League team, required to provide a thumbprint for a driver's license, I rise in support of this bill. It does not limit law-abiding citizens' right to purchase ammunition. It only provides additional safeguards to make sure those who are purchasing are who they say they are. So I stand in strong support of this bill, and I would ask my colleagues for an aye vote as well.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to come at this from a little bit different angle, but Mr. Speaker and members, if you recall, yesterday we spoke on a Coliseum bill for about, an hour or so about new revenues in the state of California. Here we go again, folks. Every time that we chip away at our rights and the ability to buy ammo and enjoy our basic freedoms, we take revenue out of the state coffers that help
fund all of our social programs. We've got to understand here that what we are doing in bills like this is taking the ability away from being able to protect our families. As we early release prisoners, and we're doing it as we sit here today, you would like to release more of them. We are going to have the ability to protect our families. That's why you see guns going off the shelves very quickly today. That's why you see ammo going off the shelves very quickly today, because there's a basic need to be able to protect ourselves and our families. By doing bills like this, we are basically taking our fundamental freedoms of our kids away. And it's bills like these that make this country much weaker, and I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson.
I also rise in opposition. I get why in downtown L.A. somebody would want to have a bill like this. But see, I represent a rural portion of San Diego County. And I find it offensive that you're going to make my constituents who are law-abiding not have access to ammo because they won't be able to mail order it. You know, some of my constituents don't have the ability to travel to downtown San Diego or surrounding communities on a regular basis to purchase this. We've seen other bills that want to limit the quantity of ammo purchased at a time. You know, we're not talking about criminals doing this because, after all, criminals don't have a right to a gun. They can't go into a gun store and purchase it. So who are we really talking about? We're talking about law-abiding citizens who wish to use target practice. They may want to do some hunting. They may want it for self-protection. But if they live in a rural community, they need not apply, because this bill is going after rural counties and rural communities like no other gun bill has. So all I ask is, why can't you just let my people go?
Mrs. Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just wanted to share a story that I received. I got more comments on this bill from my constituents than probably any other bill that we're voting on today, overwhelmingly asking me to stand up for the Second Amendment and to vote against this bill. But there was one that stood out amongst that outpouring of opposition from my district, and that was from an elderly gentleman who participates in a cowboy shooting match. He and his wife, twice a year, like to go and reenact cowboy shooting clubs with a group of their friends, and they get together regularly. And he went through exactly how much ammunition he goes through in these cowboy shooting matches, and it's about 1,000 rounds per year. About 500 each time. And this bill would have a significant impact on their ability to fund a hobby of theirs, which is this cowboy enactments. And so while I understand that in urban areas this is a tremendous problem, and I do think that there's a way that we can work out a solution for the urban areas that still allows the rural areas to participate in things like cowboy gun show matches, and at the same time protect the Second Amendment. So I urge your no vote.
Thank you. All debate having ceased. Mr. DeLeon, you may close. Oh, Mr. Gilmore, my apologies, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'll make this very, very, very brief. Criminals will never abide by laws. That's why they're criminals. We need to target the black market for the sale of ammunition. I urge a no vote on this.
Thank you. Mr. DeLeon, you may close. Mr. DeLeon, you may close. Can you turn on Mr. DeLeon's mic, please?
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me demystify, if you will, some of the things that have been stated just a few moments ago. Number one, this is an attack on the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. This has nothing to do with the Second Amendment of the Constitution. If you read the bill, I have it here for you. Take the time, my colleagues, for those who oppose this measure. Read the bill. This has nothing to do with guns. This has nothing to do with guns at all whatsoever. Just read the bill. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. There was insinuation that there were law enforcement agencies, groups, and organizations throughout the state of California who oppose this measure. We haven't received one single letter, one single phone call in opposition to this letter. I think it'd be better stated that they have taken no position. The fact that they have taken no position on this measure, AB 962, should not be misconstrued or misread as opposition, official opposition from police organizations throughout the state on AB 962. So let me demystify that. Another issue, too, is somehow, some way, with this measure, we're taking money out of the coffers, and we'd have to cut more social programs. I have no clue how that is germane to 962. Another issue here is that I'll prohibit online sales and transactions. I have taken the time to negotiate with folks. Online transactions are permissible under 962. However, you will have to receive your ammunition, just like when you purchase a firearm at the store, whether gun, tackle, ammo store. You have to buy your ammunition there. You can make the purchase and hit click and enter and purchase your ammunition, but you're going to have to make a face-to-face transaction. Let's simplify this measure because this measure is not too complex. All I want to do is prohibit felons, folks from a prohibited class, gangbangers from buying ammunition. It happens day in and day out. You can get a 17-year-old kid who goes into an ammo store today, and he can buy as much as ammunition he wants because we have no registry, no framework that exists that shows that that individual has to provide a driver's license to show proof of age. Moreover, we have nothing that exists right now that will tell a vendor if in fact that individual is from a prohibited class. Let's put this in context and let's try to demystify this. You can walk out of San Quentin Prison. You can walk out of Vacaville or Folsom or Chino. You can walk out of Pelican Bay. And you can walk across the street or to any other store, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Big Five or a gun store, and you can buy all the ammunition you want because we have no checks and balances. We have no mechanism. I think it's quite clear. And just 12 months alone, in 12 months alone here in Sacramento, law enforcement, Sacramento Police Department, in the last 12 months, have arrested 192 individuals who were prohibited from purchasing ammunition. 192. Out of those 192, 151 had felony convictions. These are real numbers. They're not embellished. Out of 151, 15 of them were gang members, 44 were on probation, 41 were second strikers, 2 of them were third strikers, 4 were sex offenders, and 2 had already been to prison for murder. That was the total number of the 192 individuals in the last 12 months alone here in the city of Sacramento. The Sacramento police also recovered 144 firearms, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and guess what? 8 explosive devices.
30 seconds,
8 bombs.
Mr. De Leon.
Let's do everything we can within our power. Listen, trust our police officers up and down the state of California. Let's give them the necessary tools so they can do their job to protect our friends, protect our families, protect our loved ones. This is all what this measure is all about, helping our local police officers up and down the state of California. I understand the gun culture, and I'm taking guns away from folks. But let's also be mindful that we got to do everything imaginable as a state legislature to enforce our laws and to make sure we protect our families, and we do so by helping our law enforcement agents. Madam Speaker, as well as members on both sides of the aisle, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 31. Senate amendments are concurred in. We'll go now to Mr. Jones. File item 214. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1132 by Assemblymember Jones and others, an act relating to anatomical gifts.
May open, Mr. Jones.
Madam Speaker, members, AB 1132 is back on concurrence from the Senate. The Senate amendments were technical and clarifying in nature. The bill provides us with an opportunity here in California to encourage more organ donation by allowing the DMV to, every time people renew their licenses, prompt people to ask them if they would like to donate their organs. The bill has enjoyed widespread bipartisan support in both houses. I respectfully ask for aye vote.
Mr. Berryhill.
Madam Speaker, I guess this is no big surprise that I'm in full support of this bill. I think everybody knows what I've been through over the last, since 8 years with the heart transplant. But when I got my transplant, our goal in Donate Life was to have 100,000 people on the registry list. Now we're in the millions, and it's because of programs like this that give people opportunities like myself to be able to contribute to society. I think it's a great bill. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Jones, you may close.
I couldn't put it more eloquently than my colleague, Mr. Berryhill. Thank you for your co-authorship. I ask for aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 72, noes 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. We'll go on to file item 215 by Mr. Huffman. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1173 by Assemblymember Huffman and others, an act relating to hazardous materials.
Mr. Huffman, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill, back on concurrence, will finally create a free and convenient system of recovering and recycling used fluorescent light products, and it'll give us a chance to also make sure that the mercury, the trace levels of mercury that exist in those products, are properly handled and disposed of. We'll do that by requiring those who receive public goods charge funding to help promote the sale of fluorescent lighting, participate in a recycling program, and we'll give them the flexibility to design it and make it work. Respectfully request your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 23. Senate amendments are concurred in. Move on to file item 216. Mr. Nilo. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1291 by Assemblymember Nilo, an act relating to unclaimed property.
May open, Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While AB 1291 is, frankly, a bit of a shadow of its former self, reforming some abuses that I believe exist in the unclaimed property area, this bill does make some small steps toward making sure that property that shouldn't escheat to the state in the first place will not, and it also assists in more rapidly reuniting property to their rightful owners. The bill does make some incremental changes. They are positive. I recommend an aye vote.
Seeing no discussion nor debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 66, noes 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. Mr. Torrico, for what purpose?
Madam Speaker, I have a series of motions. If we could return to motion resolutions, please.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Lowenthal to take up file item 87, SB 193 by Senator Lowenthal, without reference to file in mock-up form today for the purpose of third reading and to first adopt amendments.
Without objection. Mr. Hagman, without objection. So for this bill has been amended today. All right, members, we are taking up Senator Lowenthal's bill without reference to file. Waiting on the board. There it is. There's the information. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 193 by Senator Lowenthal, an act relating to class size.
You may open, Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a district bill sponsored by the Long Beach Unified School District that deals with the very unique needs of Catalina Island. This bill allows for a class size reduction waiver if students from the island must be relocated to the mainland in the case of an emergency evacuation. This bill passed the House here a few days ago. We brought it back to delete the urgency clause. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 52, noes 0. Measure passes. Ms. Hayashi has asked that we return to file item 59. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 691 by Senator Yi, an act relating to accountants.
You may open, Ms. Hayashi.
It's actually SB 819.
Do we need to correct the board? SB 691. File item 15. Oh, we are not on the supplemental file. We are back to the regular file. Senate third reading. File item 59. We'll need to resolve this, Ms. Hayashi. There seems to be a difference between the file and the bill that you want to present. Mr. Torrico, for what purpose?
Under motion of resolutions, once again, Madam Speaker, SB 291 by Senator Calderon is at the desk. At the request of the author, I request unanimous consent to rescind the floor action of August 27th, whereby it passed to the Senate, and return the bill to third reading.
Mr. Hagman, without objection.
Mr. Solorio is not prepared to take up that item, take up amendments on that item without reference to file SB 291.
Mr. Solorio.
Madam Speaker, the amendments delete the urgency clause. I ask that they be adopted.
Members, the amendments are in order. They are at the desk. We can adopt these by a voice vote. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Members, we've adopted the amendments. We will now take up the bill in chief without reference to file. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 291 by Senator Calderon, an act relating to insurance.
You may open, Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill was recently passed on the consent calendar. It's regarding mortgage guarantee insurers so that we can continue to have loans being provided in our state. Due to the fragile housing market, we need to make sure that this bill passes. I do ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Garrick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to join my colleague on the Insurance Committee in urging an aye vote on this. Without this action, the mortgage insurance industry will be at a disadvantage or setback, and I think it will have a definite effect across the state on the housing industry and the sale of homes. I encourage everyone to vote aye.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Solorio, care to close?
I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Aye 64, no 0. The bill passes. All right, Ms. Hayashi, we've resolved the difference here. So this is without reference to file. It is Senate Bill 819. Rules have been waived. It is eligible to take up. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 819 by Senator Yi, an act relating to professions and vocations, making an appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Members, this was item 2 if you're looking for the analysis on this bill. Ms. Hayashi, you may open.
Thank you. Madam Speaker and members, finally, SB 819 would allow California certified public accountants to practice in other states by adopting 150-hour educational requirements for their new students. This bill also expands the authorized functions that may be performed by nurse practitioners. This measure has received bipartisan support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Ma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I rise in strong support of this measure. The language on the CPA licensure requirements represents years of work by a number of legislators, including the CPA caucus, Mr. Rajanielo and myself, and our honorary member, Ms. Hayashi, chair of the Business and Professions Committee. Without making the changes that were described, it would be nearly impossible for California accountants to provide their services to business that operate across state lines. This bill represents a compromise that ensures that CPAs will be sufficiently educated and their licenses will be recognized by other states. I strongly urge an aye vote.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo the previous comments of support. I also am a strong support of this bill. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, Ms. Hayashi, you may close.
I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Aye 66, no 0. On the urgency, aye 66, no 0 on the bill. The bill passes. Mr. Torrico.
Madam Speaker, under motion resolutions, please.
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Skinner to take up SB 402 by Senator Wolk without reference to file for the purpose of third reading today.
We have a committee report that needs to be read before we can take that bill up. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 402 with amendments.
Mr. Hagman?
No, when we get to the amendments, Madam Speaker, we'd like to have a roll call vote on that.
On adopting the amendments? These are committee amendments. Members, Mr. Hagman's requested a roll call vote to adopt the committee amendments. Clerk has read the amendments. One moment. All right, members, this is what we're voting on the board. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. This is on adopting the committee amendments. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Torrico is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, ayes 43, noes 20. The amendments are adopted. Returning to motions and resolutions, Mr. Tarico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe the motion to take up that item without reference to file is now in order. SB 402 by Senator Wolk.
Very well. Without reference to file, Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We do request a roll call vote and urge a no vote.
So the motion now is to take up the bill without reference to file. We are going to suspend the rules in order to do so. Mr. Hagman has asked for a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. Mr. Tarico is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 43, ayes 44, noes 21. The motion carries. Now we are ready to take up SB 402 without reference to file. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 402 by Senator Wolk, an act relating to recycling, make an appropriation, therefore.
Ms. Skinner, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill has the support of the industry affected, the environmental groups affected, and will fix the problem that we currently have where the funds in the Department of Conservation that support the people who process our recycled materials. So those are the people that are working the sorter lines, that are baling the newspapers, the aluminum, sorting the glass, doing that kind of work. The funds that support that work is empty. Without this fix, we have the problem of our conservation corps not receiving their funds. We have the problem of processors up and down the state not receiving their funds, and the job loss would be tremendous. So we got together and we got the industry in the room, the different processors and conservation corps and other players who are affected. We also help consumers with this fix because on July 1st, due to the depletion in the fund, all of our bottlers and manufacturers got an increase in their processing fee, an increase that not only they had to bear, but directly affected the price of the product. This bill reverses that and brings it back to pre-July 1 levels so that our bottlers and our breweries and our different processors don't have that fee. Our consumers get a relief, and it enables the fund to be restored, and those manufacturers who make products out of secondary materials will be able to continue to receive their grants. This bill has got widespread support. It passed out of the committee today, bipartisan vote, and I urge your aye vote.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I was listening very carefully to the words of the floor manager, and one thing that she said was she cited about the California Redemption Value Fund, quote, due to the depletion of the fund. And I note with interest, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, that this fund has been raided by the legislature to the tune of over $500 million in the last few years, $566 million. Gee, do you suppose that's how perhaps the fund has become depleted, that perhaps the people in this chamber depleted it? Now, we spent the money on things like AB 32 compliance. Boy, trying to reduce California's greenhouse gas emissions, that's really tightly related in a very close nexus to returning bottles and cans for a redemption value. How about conservation programs? I suppose some of those might be, but again, the nexus is not very tight. Now, another thing that's contributed to the depletion of the fund, other than our own actions, although you might argue that our actions have made it worse, is the fact that instead of 60% of the people or of the bottles and cans being redeemed because of the current economic downturn, we're up to 75%. So people are recycling more because they're trying to save every penny in these tough economic times. I would argue, of course, that we've made those times worse because, of According to Forbes magazine, we have the worst combination of taxes and regulatory policy of any state. So while people are out saving their pennies and nickels, they're recycling more. It should be a good thing. So perhaps rather than increase the cost to consumers, maybe what this body should do is give back the some $500 million plus that it's rated over the years, and that way this fund could continue to do its proper job, and maybe we wouldn't have to raise the cost of consumer goods on the hardworking men and women of the state of California. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Chesbrough.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I just want to briefly point out that recycling has everything to do with global warming. It's one of the best things that Californians can be doing to reduce their carbon emissions. So the facts are clear about that, and just wanted to set the record straight. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
I just wanted to add, I wanted to commend the author of this bill for really putting this together in a way that's not only preventing a crisis in terms of what was upon us, but also saving the conservation course, which is a really important element of this. And so I want to thank her for that and urge an aye for this bill.
Mr. Logue.
Madam Speaker, thank you. This has been a really difficult one for me, but I've decided to support this primarily because the bottom line is this, is that if we don't get behind this bill, let me put it this way. If I buy this plastic bottle full of water, I have to pay 10 cents, but I can always get it back if I return it. If we do not pass this bill, business is going to inherit a $500 million hit, and that is going to be passed on to the consumers anyhow, but they're not going to be able to get their money back. Either that or there'll be a lot of job losses over this, or there's going to be less people buying consumer goods, and sales tax revenues will decline. So the problem that we have today is it's bad or worse. And in my mind, not passing this thing would be worse. I do not want to put the business in California in a worse position than it is now. It's in the worst position in the country. So I'd like to list, if permission to read.
Without objection.
I'd like to read some of the supporters. That is the Glass Protective League, Glass Packaging Institute, California Grocers Association, the Retailers Association, Anheuser-Busch, League of Cities, RCRC, Heineken, Institute of Scrap Recyclers, Tomrad Pacific Small Brewers Association, Miller Coors, Republic Services, Next Cycle, and et cetera. This allows for thousands of jobs to continue. The bottom line is that it is time that business quit bearing the brunt of our mistakes, which is raiding funds that should be kept in the recycling program. But this has happened. And if we don't act, we're going to lose jobs, or these jobs will leave California, which would be a greater disaster for this state. So I stand in support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry, I thought it was Mr. Berryhill for a minute. Mr. Gilmore.
You had me confused with Mr. Berryhill?
Just the location of the microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise support of this bill. This was a difficult vote for me a few moments ago when we were in committee. But this really comes back to, for me, it comes back to jobs in California. I mean, in my district, we're getting hammered. Some of my district, we have 40% unemployment. And the businesses, we have about 5,000 business enterprises in California recycling infrastructure. Many of them are mom and pop businesses, small businesses. 85,000 Californians are employed through this enterprise, if you will. The state's bottle and cycle recycling law is critical and popular component supporting many, many jobs in California. We need to get behind this and support this bill. I encourage your aye vote on this.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of this measure because this is going to protect jobs. In California, our economy is already beset with the highest unemployment that we have seen literally in decades. If we do not do everything in our power to try to preserve the jobs that this will help make sure exist, the 80,000+ jobs that make California work, we are doing this state a tremendous disservice. Members, if you are for jobs, I believe an aye vote is an appropriate one here, and I would encourage it.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wasn't sure whether I was going to get up and speak, and I am not particularly excited at the prospect of debating with my Republican colleagues. I understand the points that are being made in favor of the bill. The problem is that I think we lose either way. To get back to the reasons that have been stated as to why we're in this problem in the first place, it's because we've been using this fund as the general fund's piggy bank. Pure and simple. What's going to happen with this approach is we'll increase the deposit to 10 cents. Fewer than 100% of the people will redeem that as they do currently. The fund will build up again. The piggy bank will get full again, and we'll take it again for the general fund. We're chasing our tail. There's a better solution. If we truly do need a temporary increase in the fee to build the fund back up, we could consider a temporary fee, 10 cents for a year or two. And to solve the problem of the tail chasing, we could say, don't borrow the money from this fund anymore. Use it for what it is intended, or if we do, pay it back within 12 months. And you've got to. There is no a time limit on paying the money back. We continue to defer it. There is a better solution here. If I understand correctly, this is a simple majority vote. It's not going to take effect until next year. We could come back next year and craft a bill kind of on the lines of what I just suggested and solve the problem, but solve the problem once and for all. I'm going to vote no on this.
Seeing no further debate or discussion, Ms. Skinner, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill was carefully crafted so that it doesn't cause there won't be a lot of residue in the fund. So it'll be very hard to raid the fund because the way this bill is crafted, it pretty much brings in the amount of money that's going to be necessary to make our processors whole, to make our community conservation centers whole, and to enable us to be able to give back the redemption value to the consumers for the bottles and cans that they purchase. I think this is the first time a bill like this has had the kind of broad support that this one does. And it does so because we all sat in a room for multiple meetings and worked it out and hammered it out till we worked it out in a way that people felt satisfied, so that we have the glass packaging industry, Anheuser-Busch, Heineken, the grocers, the retailers, the small brewers, the recycling industry, and all the rest who do support this bill. It will preserve the igloos and the redemption centers at our grocery stores so that those consumers who want to get their redemption value back will still be able to, and that those of us who prefer just to put it on the curb can just put it on the curb. So it does those things, and it's, I think, a very good, measured bill, and I urge your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 12. The measure passes. Members, it's been noted that the temperature in here is very warm. It's very warm outside. We're aware of the problem. It is being addressed, although some would say turning off the air conditioner is the best way to get us to finish on time up here. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we could return to motions and resolutions, please.
Without objection.
At the author's request, please move file item number 44, SB 797, by Senator Pavley to the inactive file. File item 44, SB 797, Senator Pavley.
797 to inactive. Clerk will note without objection.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirements to allow the Water, Parks, and Wildlife Committee to meet and to hear SB 68 immediately in room 437. SB 68 in room 437.
Mr. Hagman?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We would like a roll call vote. Requested no vote.
Members, the motion is to suspend Joint Rule 62A and allow the bill to be heard. Mr. Hagman wants to do this with a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. Mr. Todico asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman for a no vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Mr. Todico asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman for a no vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 26. The motion passes. Water, Parks, and Wildlife will meet in room 437 immediately.
Can I get a pass?
Room 437. Members, we will take a brief recess until 7:30. Dinner is going to be delivered into the members' lounge, so there will be food here in the building around the same time. Also at 7:30, Utilities and Commerce Committee will be meeting in the Rules Committee room. In room 437. Utilities and Commerce will meet at 7:30 in room 437. So please recess for an hour. We will have dinner delivered to the members' lounge. You may leave the chamber. So once again, recess until 7:30, and at 7:30, Utilities and Commerce will meet in room 437.